Hi guys, this is Zay with the TJZ RambleCast, and today we have a very special episode. And one of the things I wanted to acknowledge real quick first, Jaedaen will not be with us today. He's actually in an undisclosed location somewhere in the world, but he will definitely be back quickly for the next episode. We miss you, brother. We'll hope to talk to you and see you soon. But today we are talking about ARPGs. And today we do have a special guest with us, our good friend, longtime good friend, Malentent. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
And as always with us is Tath.
Hey.
Now, just to give you a little information on Malentent, he can be found on twitch.tv/Malentent. He does his video game streamings on Friday nights at 7 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time, Saturday mornings at 7 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time, and Sunday mornings on 7 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time. That's very early Malentent. And also he does have a YouTube channel, which he does clips, guides, and other video game content. And that is at youtube.com/Malentent. Once again, welcome to the podcast, and let's discuss especially what's going on now with the release of Diablo IV.
POE versus Diablo IV, fight. Okay, we're not going quite there, but
That's a good one.
We've alluded to this for a while, though, I think, Mal. I mean, I kind of put you as the defender of all things POE, not because you agree with all their decisions, but because we've stepped away, but you have not. And I know we've waxed poetic on this conversation, so we'll try not to go too crazy with the super negative stuff, but we'll get into POE later. Sorry, Zay, continue.
You are fine. You're completely fine. So just to go a little bit, we have actually discussed in another previous podcast our history with, I think it was the Activision Blizzard podcast that we had previously.
Activision podcast, if you will.
Yes, that one. We had discussed our experiences with that a little bit. But Mal, what is your history with ARPGs, Diablo, and I guess since we did bring up, or Tath brought up POE being Path of Exile, what is your history, if you don't mind going into that a little bit?
My history with action RPGs probably starts way back in the Ultima series. So I would say my first introduction to ARPGs would be Ultima 6, around about there. I think it was either 5 or 6, which turned into which started the ARPG for me.
Did you ever play the Underworlds, out of curiosity?
Yes, I did. I played Underworlds. Ultima was like that was my baby. I played that all the way up and into when Underworlds came out. I think Underworlds was in 2000, I think it was. But I started off with Ultima. I played the one that was based off of it. And I forgot the name of it, but it had the same engine. I played that. Then Diablo came out, and I think I was running Diablo 2, Dungeon Siege, the Dungeon Siege 2, Dungeon Siege 3. I played all of those, and I kind of just every time an AARPG comes out, I actually play it. Diablo 4 is out now. Before it was like Wolcen. I played Wolcen. I played all these iterations of AARPG or action RPGs.
And you've done Last Step Back too, even though it's not quite out yet.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I finally did Last Epoch. I was trying to wait until it was ready and it was completed, but they got the multiplayer in place. And when they got the multiplayer in place and they kind of ended, it's like the storyline, I don't think is going to be changing too much. I decided I was going to do a playthrough. And that was actually a lot of fun. Even though it's still in development, still being worked on, I had a fun time playing it. I do not know when they're going to complete it, but I am actually looking forward to that one coming out.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of good things. We avoided Wolson because of the initial launch week drama and whatnot. Talk to you with your review. Like, there was no compelling reason for us to jump in and to play it, right? Since we didn't do it right out the gate. And I think I think Zay and I have both been interested in playing Last Epoch once they settle in the multiplayer. Like, I'd rather they work on that, get the feedback, and improve it where it needs to be. Because I don't, since they're still an alpha and they're a small team, I don't expect it's going to be perfect out the gate, right?
Yeah, that's true. They this last one was actually a lot of fixes to what they initially deployed, because they deployed multiplayer a while ago, and then they kind of finally got after they deployed it and found all their bugs. They kind of worked really hard on fixing it, and this last one was a solid multiplayer configuration.
It might be in a state where we could mess around with it. I don't know. We don't play as many AARPGs as you do, or at least, I mean, I know your big game is Path of Exile, but we flitter with a lot of different genres, right? I think you play more consistently ARPGs than we do in general.
I probably would agree with that. I enjoy the ARPG genre, but by far my favorite game play style, and which is hard to play online, is the turn-based play style of XCOM. I mean, actually, strategy-based, turn-based is my favorite play style.
You're my brother there.
Yeah, it's not that it's not that sexy to stream. Let's put it like
that. We've talked about this before. Like, Final Fantasy Tactics is my favorite game of all time, I think, at this point. I mean, I have a lot there. I have my tier of like top 10 games, but like the one I crow about is Final Fantasy Tactics. And I know you heard me wax poetic on Tactics Ogre, which is kind of the predecessor that didn't get released over here, and that I played the end of last year or whatever. I have a lot of good things to say, some quibbles to say about the remake, but like those are my jam. And XCOM is definitely in that same area. And as you know personally, I also love BattleTech. I've been doing the complete conversion mod for the Harebrained Schemes game, BattleTech 3062. There's all sorts of crazy. So turn-based is definitely my jam. I hear you. I can't help it. I always refer. It's in my brain space, so I'm going to mention BattleTech at some point in this podcast, and probably the next one, because I'll probably still be playing it by then. Anyway, Zay, did you have another item, or do we want to kind of go down the list?
No, I think we're ready to discuss the new hotness. And any particular...
Well, do we want to talk about its predecessor first?
Well, true. Let's discuss a little bit about Diablo 3, because potentially, I know we did discuss it in our behalf during the Activision Blizzard podcast a little bit, but we have not heard, of course, some Malentent's feelings on Diablo 3, and potentially we can even go into a little bit of discussion on Diablo 1 and 2. And I'll briefly state, I love Diablo 1 and 2. I could probably play Diablo 2 forever, as I've stated before, but I know I have to get on Battle.net, probably have to do all these things to actually play it. Not gonna do it. Sorry, Blizzard. Not gonna try to get this game again. Not gonna give you more money when it's not reward or needed. But Diablo 3, as I've stated before, just played through the campaign once, was not satisfied with it, stopped playing. Maybe I should have picked up the one of the expansions for it, but I've heard people say that they're pretty good and they really gave some more replayability for Diablo 3, but at that point I was so turned off by the campaign of Diablo 3 that I just forget it. I'm gone.
Yeah, the campaign sucked. I had no desire to play it more than once. Mechanically, it was very well polished and sane, but it was very different than Diablo 2. But again, it was the campaign. I did it. I didn't want to play another character. I had no interest. I mean, there was interesting characters. I just had no vehicle that made me want to play another one. How about you, Mal? I know you have more experience with Diablo 3 than we did.
For me, Diablo 3 was it was very entertaining. for me. I like to go through the story, kind of run through the story and everything. The replayability was not there. What happened, and the reason why I actually got back into it, was I had a friend of mine and he was like, "Hey, you've got to play the seasons. You have to play." And so when he asked me to play again, I decided I was going to play. So I grabbed the expansion, put the expansion on my system, and realized that, yeah, the expansion did make a lot of differences. It modified a lot of things. The story kept going a little bit. Diablo 3 without the expansion seems like it was not even half a game. It's kind of like, yeah, we're getting you up to a point, and then you're just kind of hung. You're hung out to dry. That's how I felt.
Sounds like StarCraft 2 as well. StarCraft 2 had the same problem. Like, it was 3 campaigns in 3 different games and all sold to you for full price. Anyway, continue, sir.
Yeah. Then what happened was, as soon as I got that expansion, that one actually, it made me feel that I could play through it again. So I played through only 2 characters. The replayability still is not there for me per se, but my friend would be, what he would like to do is he would play every season, and then when he would be like, "Let me power level you through the season." And so that's what he would want me to do, to try to play with him again. I did it twice, and that was it.
Yeah, I mean, I know there was a core group of people that, like, they wouldn't necessarily play every season either, right? Like, in general, I think the long-term Diablo 3 fan, they'd play every X number of seasons, but they would play that season for a week, 2 weeks, a month, depending on how quickly they went, right? If you're a streamer, you could probably do it. You could probably consume all the content of a season in a weekend or a week. If you're a more casual or not streaming for money type person, I know you could probably do it in a couple weeks. And then the people who go really casual, at maybe a month or so, right? But that was it. That was a season.
Yeah, it was a grind for gear. That's
Yeah.
pretty much what Diablo 3 was. You played it, you destroyed as much stuff as you could to get gear so you could get stronger. And that there was nothing you could do other than grind for the gear piece. And that was kind of hard to deal with, because you got to a specific power level or configuration and you were stuck. It was, I am now just not going anywhere unless I get that piece of gear.
Right. I think you'll agree with this comment. The expansion was a fantastic starting point for further development, which Activision then decided they weren't going to do.
I can agree with that.
If they had continued, it may have been a decent, mild competitor, not doing the same thing to Path of Exile, but because it never got further development after that expansion, it was a very stagnant game, and I don't think Seasons changed that in any significant way.
It didn't. The replay, like I said, replayability to me wasn't there. It was chase the piece of gear, and there was not enough for you to do. To me, a grind is a problem. This is counter to any AARPG lover. You're going to grind. You have to grind, but I have to enjoy the grind. And that's where, if I'm not enjoying the grind, I just not going to be there.
Yeah, I think for Zay and I, we need to have ability to continue to expand our character. If we have like, oh cool, there's a chance of actually cool gear dropping, and not like it's going to take us 3 weeks to get a piece of gear, we'll keep doing it. Which is why I think when Warframe had its hooks in us, it was so successful, because it was like, okay, we'd have like 2 or 3 different things we're trying to get, different frames or weapons we're trying to unlock. And we do one of those grinds for a while. And if it felt like we were getting tedious, it was either step away, go watch some TV or something for a little while, and then come back to it. Or, okay, well, why don't we switch to a different piece of content to try to work on getting something else? But because we always had those things, which we knew that, yes, it took a while, but we always had a goal that we could foreseeably get that would do it for us.
I could agree with that.
But I don't, again, we never got into that loop for Diablo 3, right?
Right.
And you know, in POE, when we get there later, like we played characters way longer than you did. You may get farther in the shorter time play that you would have, but like you'd switch characters way more often, whereas we'd play like 1 or 2 characters a season, or well, league in their nomenclature. You'd play, as I joke, like 10, 15. And maybe it wasn't that many, but you know, like an order of operations significantly more than us, because you could only last playing that one character so long, right?
Right.
So that makes sense in context why Diablo 3 would just, you'd have a similar feeling to us in that regard, because you would tire of it much quicker. Like, yes, I'm playing this character. And how long until I get this next gear? F it. But what's the point of playing another character, because it's the same thing?
Agreed.
I think that covers Diablo 3 pretty good, unless, say, you have any closing comments.
I'm sorry, but fuck Diablo 3.
Hey, I didn't drop the F-bomb first. Woohoo! I also agree with that. I'm sorry. I don't find it. Go listen to the F Activision podcast. We do a extensive destroying of all things Activision, Blizzard, and that. I think we're good. So next topic.
Oh, you're leaving that to me? Okay, sure. So now that we have Diablo 4 out and we have been playing it for a little bit, I know that we have discussed privately, and I thought that would be a good thing that for all of us to talk on the podcast. Any particular concerns leading up to the launch when they was announced, as far as Diablo 4 and looking at the trailers, you know, I was fully expecting of seeing somebody from Blizzard saying, "Hey, you guys don't have any phones." Yeah, let's not get into Immortal. I would have to say the biggest concern for me for Diablo 4 was a repetition of Diablo 3. Just pretty much going through the campaign and not only finding the campaign, like we have discussed, the campaign was okay, but just finding a thud at the end. The trailers, they were fine of Diablo 4 when they were released. I was going to wait. Definitely not doing any pre-orders. I'm not doing any pre-orders in any particular game in the future, because everything seems to be, oh, this can actually change at the very last minute, and things are promised, not necessarily delivered with any particular game. But with Diablo 4, I felt that I was burnt so badly with Diablo 3 and not getting as much enjoyment as I did with Diablo 1 and Diablo 2, that I just honestly was going to wait months down the line to see what the reviews were. And if the reviews were lackluster after Diablo 4 release, to see if maybe something gets improved, any expansions or things like that. I was just not going to even step a toe into it.
Whereas Mal, I know you bought into early access, but you being the streamer, it makes sense. So how about your thoughts about, I don't think you consumed too much of the leading up to Diablo 4, right?
That's correct. I kind of tried to stay away from it. The reason why is because there was so much negativity and so much problems with how Diablo Immortal came out and how much money and gotcha they were going with that. They did everything they possibly could to get money out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, it kind of turned me off of, oh, wow, what do I really want to go ahead, and how bad is Diablo 4 going to be? So I didn't want to get too involved, because I didn't want to have it color, my color me too badly on the game, because Diablo 1, Diablo 2, I love those. They were great. Diablo 3, it was a fun thing to play, but no replayability. But I accept that in certain games. Certain games you can have non-replayability, and that's fine.
I think that's a sin in action RPGs based on their
Right.
formula, but I know what you're saying.
And so when Diablo 4 was coming out, I was trying not to look too far ahead and see the things what people were saying and everything like that, so that when I got it, I could play it. And the only negative thing that I had was the early access thing. The early access thing was, it hurt me to hear them and how much it was costing. You had to pay so much money so you can get and be online 4 days early.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I don't think they learned the right lesson. I think they learned that they can keep doing that, and they will keep doing that to make 15,
Right.
20 extra bucks for every game they release from now on. I wish the industry didn't learn that lesson, but that genie's not going back in a bottle.
Right. And as a streamer, if I'm gonna capitalize on being able to play that game, I have to capitalize on that early stream, the early access. And so I had to pay for the early access.
You don't get condemnation from me for that. It's the cost of doing business, so to speak, even if it's not your primary income. It's a reality. If you're going to stream it, you have to be in part of the zeitgeist. That's part of playing with the model to ensure you have the best chance of getting people. As a business geek, I get all that. I think of the three of us, I'm actually the one that consumed the most about Diablo 4 leading up to its launch, and it wasn't because of hype. It's because I am a business geek, and I have been pretty dead set on, if I never supported Activision Blizzard again, I would be a happy, happy man. But I wanted to see if the train wreck was unfolding or not. And what everything that came out of all of that early stuff is, holy crap, they actually seem to have let their developers make a decent game. The only problem leading up to launch that I saw was that it appeared that their decision was, we are going to monetize this 10 ways from Sunday in every way other than pay to win. Plus side, cool, I don't have to spend any money on this game posts. Like, there's nothing compelling me to do that. Downside, okay, they're going to make it a full price box game, and then they're going to give it a free to play model minus pay to win. That's not cool. But we did talk about this, I think, even on the Activision Blizzard podcast with Jaedaen, where we're like, well, at some point we're going to get Mal in here, and we're going to have to talk POE, and maybe we should, suck it up, pick up Diablo 4 if it's halfway okay, play through it, we can do the impressions, and then talk to Mal, make him defend POE. I'm not going to make you do that fully. But that's why we're here today, right? We did end up picking it up. So I guess going on that tangent, what sounds more exciting to talk first? Because I think we're going to do both of this. Do you want to talk about your early experiences with Diablo 4, or do you want to just jump right into talking about the cluster F that is the shop?
Let's go with the early experiences. I mean, the early experiences probably. Let's go ahead and go with the good things before we go into any of the bad things. Because I would like to say, yeah, I believe that the game was fun. I mean, my early experiences, yes, there was a lot of things that were going on. I actually played the game 2 different ways. So my initial playthrough was one that I was racing with other streamers, and we were streamers that weren't trying to get onto the statue at Blizzard. We were streamers that were just trying to race and beat each other. So we played pretty heavily, pretty hard, trying to run through. But I didn't want to ruin the story for myself. So I did not look at any cutscenes. I did not. If it could be skipped, it was skipped. I mean, it was just like boom, boom, boom.
A lot of the stuff in this game, you can actually skip the dialogue, like pretty impressively, which is actually a really big plus for replayability. Like if you've
Right.
seen a cutscene 5 times, you probably don't want to see it a 6th.
Right. So I skipped everything, got to the end game, beat the final boss, and then I started the grind of the world. So that was play style, play capability, and I tried that. So that went really well. The second place time I went through and I'm playing with my sons. So we're playing together. We're looking at every cutscene, doing every side quest that's inside of a city. We're not doing the ones outside the city that you run into. We're doing only the city ones first. And then we're going to go and do those other ones later. But we're listening to every cutscene, listening to everything that's going on. And the nuances of the world is pretty interesting. These things are happening because of everybody should know Lilith is the big bad guy and walking around the world.
If you've seen the intro cutscene or talked to anyone who's played 3 seconds of the game, yeah. I agree with you.
So, so she's around the world and her influence is seen in the side quests, in the things that are going on. You actually see those things. So I find that very interesting and very good good about the game. And so that's the second play style. The third play style was, hey, after you complete everything, there is a third place, or you have the option when you create a new character to either go initially, no matter what, you always had hardcore. They add another one, which is skip campaign.
I think they called it in Diablo 3 adventure mode, and that's what most people call it by in this, whether that's its actual name.
Right.
That's what I've seen.
So I chose that one on that third playthrough, and it opens up the world completely, so you can just go anywhere, do anything you want to do, level however you want to level. And so I've been doing that one, trying to see exactly how that feels for me. Is like, oh, I can do this, I can do dungeons, I can do all these different things. How do I want to level my character up?
I think it's fair to call out, though, it's not like you've gotten your first 2 playthroughs to 100, right? You've done some X number of that. You got to quote unquote the initial end game with the first playthrough, maybe done a little bit with that, but you haven't gone you're not like level 90 with that character, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, my character is not level 90. I don't know if I'm even going to make it that far because the way that it's been playing and the way that I've been going through, I've actually been knocking out all the challenges and challenge pieces that, for completion. Got all the strongholds. I've got all the exploration done. I've gotten all the what you want to call strongholds, exploration, waypoints. And so I'm ticking off on the list everything that needs to be done to get 100% completion. So I don't know if I'll be 100 when I complete everything.
Yeah, that's fair. I think we should talk about that more a little later, because I think that'll be the deeper analysis of our feelings on Diablo 4 in general, if that makes sense.
Right. So on that third playthrough, I have figured out my play style, my thoughts on play. So for me, I probably won't skip campaign again.
Yeah.
Even though if I have to skip cutscenes I don't want to see, I kind of like the way that the campaign draws you through the world versus the open, I can do whatever I want to do.
I am honestly really enjoying Diablo 4. We decided from early on to go through completely the campaign and the side quest, just because of the fact it's a conversation that I had with Tath early on, and that was, what is it that we wanted to get out of this? And because of what happened with Diablo 3, one of the things that I mentioned to Tath was the whole thing of, let's try to do as much content as possible so that way we get a full experience of it. And if for some reason we decide at the very end that we're done with everything that we can do at this moment, it's kind of like another Diablo 3. We ran through it. We don't want to go back into it. We can fully say that we've experienced as much as possible through the campaign and whatever is available in the world, the side quests, the events, the dungeons, everything that's available. But one of the things I was actually surprised how much I am enjoying it, especially with my controllerized sorceress. I definitely think I want to play this game again, and even run through the campaign. Of course, some of the things, skipping through them. But I'm actually happily surprised at how much I am enjoying playing the game. And I'm glad that they've seemed to have learned some lessons from Diablo 3, at least so far. We haven't completely gone through the campaign and the storyline, so we haven't seen every single thing. But so far, my experience has been a very good one.
I think we get a 3 for 3. The story and gameplay of Diablo 4 so far has been pretty good from initial impressions. Other things you two did not directly tag onto that I feel are worth mentioning. This game plays very much like a polished, improved Diablo 3, which I already said Diablo 3 seemed to have polished mechanics. I did not like the story. The world and story of Diablo 4 is very much a throwback to the feel of Diablo 1 and 2, which I like. I thought, as many people online, Diablo 3 was very cartoony. It failed in a lot of ways story-wise. I love the feeling in this game. You guys touched on that in various ways already, but I mean, I think that's my big takeaway. The game's fun. It's a fun game, and I don't know how much we're going to play post beating the capstone dungeon with these two characters right away. Maybe there will be an opportunity where the three of us get to get together and do some higher level content at some point, and we do that. That might be fun. I do kind of want to try to play another character, and I'm not sure if I want to do Rogue or if I want to do Druid. Those two are calling out to me. Sorceress did, but I've seen the Ice Sorceress from Zay's perspective. So if I was going to do it, I'd probably do Fire Sorceress. But honestly, just to kind of get the breadth of the game, I'd rather play different classes at this point, if that makes sense. But, and past that, continuing to go initial impressions, they haven't done it perfectly, but there's a lot of options for each of the characters. Like, it's way more in depth. They took away some of the concerns from Diablo 3 with it being very light on your decisions. Between the Paragon tree, which we haven't unlocked yet, the different styles of thing. Like, your first character, if I recall correct, Mal, was a necromancer just like me, right? Except you went the shadow powers. Is that right?
That is correct. I went with the shadow configuration and dropped my minions. It took a while, but I eventually dropped the minions because it just I did more damage without it.
Yeah, same. I'm still keeping my blood golem around, but I went all blood powers, and the blood golem thematically is also a blood power, right? So I'm like, Esker it, he can stick around. I'm not sacrificing him right now. But I might be forced to do that if we go past the capstone dungeon. It may make more sense. But, you did shadowy powers as your theme. I did blood powers, and they play very different. And neither of those are the best design from what I've seen online for necromancers. Bone seems to be the skills of choice for people for doing very late game. And I can see some compelling things. It's very easy to apply vulnerable. And the more you do group content, anyone applying vulnerable is going to make things die even faster for everybody else. You showed me what Bone Spirit, like, we looked at it and talked together, and that seems like a stupidly good power. Like, it makes sense. I know why Bone is the leading plan, but I don't think either of us felt constrained by technically not playing the best character design for the thing. It was at least functional. So that's a good thing for at least the campaign feeling good. Whether it will feel good, they'll feel good late game, and we might be forced into that. That's a separate concern, and one I'm not worried about right now. I'm just enjoying playing the game. And that's where I'll leave initial impressions. I think that covers a decent amount. How about, since we did a nice thing, now let's punch Blizzard in the dingus and talk about the shop.
Oh boy. Sure, I'll start with that since I love saying fuck Activision Blizzard. There I go again with the F-bombs. Ha.
You broke
Okay.
our monetization that doesn't exist.
I will touch real quick on POE, which I know we're going to be touching a little bit more on Path of Exile later on. But it's something that we know very well between us three because of playing Path of Exile. I have absolutely no problem with supporting a developer, with supporting a game by saying, here's my money, take it, give me your shit. Problem with that is the shit has to be good. I have opened up the shop for Diablo IV a couple of different times to look around, and nothing, absolutely nothing in there has any attraction for me. I have, with my Ice Mage, I found a set that I really like, and I think it's the Sturdy set, if I remember correctly, that you can pretty much customize in game. You know, you can mix and match to anything, any other pieces that you want. You can make it different colors because they have different color wheels that you can apply it to the whole set or apply it to individual pieces so that you can actually get these looks from salvaging items. The look that I'm using is from in-game items, and I have no want to give any money for the items that are in the shop whatsoever. To me, I find them absolutely ridiculous looking. Have I looked at how much they cost? Potentially once, but once I saw what they looked like, I went no. Plus, it is a $60-something game unless you chose one of the high. Somebody chooses, one of the higher options. I don't think at this moment in time it does deserve me giving more money towards this game. Maybe once more content comes out, one of the other expansion packs, which are going to be very likely costing money themselves. But my impression, no, it's not necessary to even spend one extra penny in that shop.
I think you and Mal are very similarly aligned on that statement. Anything you want to add to it, Mal?
No, she's pretty much hit the nail on the head. There's no real reason to buy anything because they made all the cool armors part of the world, and so I use those.
So the only thing I feel is worth adding on to that is good. They actually made good cosmetics in game. This is a full price game, and I can't stop them from having a shop because they're Activision Blizzard and they're one of the most greedy companies in the world in video games. They want to have a free-to-play model, but they also want your money for a big box price. So I say, screw you, good. I'm glad your cosmetics suck that are in the shop. I'm happy. I don't want people spending money on that crap. Unfortunately, there still are. Now that said, with any live service game, you need consistent funding to continue development. Well, they're already talking about there's 2 different expansions in the works. One is in serious design or is implementation, creation, etc. mode. The other one I think is very early on. Plus, they have seasons coming. For a game to exist that has ongoing development, they need ongoing funding. So you need to find a way. And there's only a finite number of people you can get in to pay the upfront costs. But eventually, you need to get money from your existing users. I acknowledge all that from a business finance perspective. What they have right now is a pile of crap. The fact that they sold a battle pass, which isn't even relevant yet, because that battle pass is for season 1, and that's once again free money for them, because half these people may not even be around for season 1. They may be done with the game by then. So those advanced versions that had that battle pass included is a joke. Also, unlike Halo Infinite, not that Halo Infinite is an amazing pillar of the doing good in video games, but one thing they do well is that, and that no one else does, is their battle passes are for all time. You can activate a battle pass that you bought before later on to get its stuff. Whereas everyone else in the industry is basically, you have a battle pass, you have X amount of time to complete it, and if you don't complete it in that time, you lost your money. Good job, chump. I hate battle passes. I hate that what they've done to video games in general. So this is all talking about the financials of monetization of this game. Nothing in here is pay to win, but I'm actually happy that the shop is as terrible as it is right now. May it stay that way for now. Once they release a new DLC, if it's another box price cost of like $40 to $60, I hope the shop continues to be sucky. If they actually release the DLC for much cheaper, like $10-15, and then they have some okay cosmetics, I might feel a little bit better. But the difference in monetization for Diablo 4 versus POE, I'm okay with the prices aren't okay in POE either, but it's a free-to-play game. So I think they get away with having their overpriced cosmetics because that's how they make their money. This is just Activision more or less being greedy, since they're already getting that initial investment money from people buying the freaking game. And shop rent from me.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned it a little bit. I just didn't go into specifics with Path of Exile for the years that we played it. And Malentent knows this. We would throw easily about $300 worth between Tath and me into just cosmetics into Path of Exile. Every league.
Well, some of that wasn't even necessary with cosmetics. Some of it was adding extra bag space but some type of microtransaction to make our life feel better and make the powers look cooler or unlock more quality of life things like the various tabs.
Correct. But after we did that a couple of times, then it became more of a cosmetic thing.
Yeah, agreed.
And like I said, between both of us, easily about $300 per league. So if you take that estimate, about $300 in a year, we were spending over $1,000 on a free-to-play game.
But we also enjoyed what we were getting from it. We weren't forced to do it, and we were supporting the continued development of game that we wanted to continue. We were definitely whales, but we also stopped that as soon as we stopped being in line with their vision.
This is true. And I'd like to bring up a little quick conversation I had with a couple of friends last night, because we were actually discussing Diablo IV and how one of them, yes, did buy the game, but is not going to be contributing any money. If there was potential as to whether Activision Blizzard might find him in their statistics worth of being included in their profits statements. And the other one brought up is like, no, because of the fact that, you logging in, you're actually costing them money because you're taking up resources in their servers. So you not adding further money to what beyond your initial expenditure is actually costing them money because of having to do the servers and the maintenance and the upkeep and all these things. And I brought a slight little counterpoint to that, which kind of goes in what we're talking about, was that, yes, but there's another thing that you may want to take into account of. There are people that are whales that will go ahead and throw money at a game just for cosmetics, just for any additional content that come up. These whales will not continue throwing additional money to a game if there's no population in there.
Yeah, because one of the things people want is like, that's why you have always the community hubs where you can see all the microtransactions, because for one of the mindsets feeding into the whole whale thing is, I've got my cosmetics, I need to show them off to you. And it also works as a branding advertising to other people in game on behalf of the company for those cosmetics, right?
So for every person that may be a whale, the company can afford to have a few more that are not, because of the fact that they may eventually look at this person that's the quote unquote whale and look at the things that they have bought and purchase them. So it's all about the potential purchases. So it's kind of like, okay, I understand what you're saying. Yes, in a sense, you're costing them money, but you're also being that person that's taking up space within the world, not only making it look populated for the whale, but looking at that other person that has spent money and maybe thinking, maybe I can spend a couple dollars just to get this one cool item. Just maybe. And that maybe means everything.
So you're tangenting into an interesting conversation that we honestly could do an entire video on, probably, or at least a large portion of video on. But I think to take it to POE, where I think it's the most appropriate, and to compare with my IT nerd companion here, Mal, but live service games are a double-edged sword for the industry. One, you can only have, as the industry is finding, is only so many are going to be successful because they demand so much of your life, of your time. A person who loves live service games, probably who does nothing but play those, and maybe someone in college who has lots of extra time or whatever, they still can only dedicate themselves to one or two. So there's a finite number of live service games that can actually that are actually going to be truly profitable over time. And two, in the case of PoE, the league cycle is massive hype, massive login for the first week or two, and then like 90% of the player base disappears. And in a sense, this is actually a fantastic thing business-wise, because you have to have, if you're doing things like AWS or some other analogous thing in a data center, wherever you're supporting, you need a certain amount of capacity to meet your peak numbers. But the fact that your player base is gone in 2 weeks means for the rest of that league, you can spin down and not have to as much cost. It's actually fantastic for PoE personally in their financials to have the player base be so focused for only those 2 weeks. It really costs them a lot less server for maintenance. So people who log in and buy the thing and then disappear are like the best customers these live service games can have. Any agree, disagree to that, Mal? This is something I've been noodling on in my brain for like, I don't know, a while.
I kind of agree with that statement, but there's hundreds of different nuances to that, and you just got to kind of look at it and from multiple different ways. From the business perspective, yeah, it's great for them to be able to spin up a whole bunch of machines and then spin them down when they don't need them. So that's wonderful on their pocket, but at the same time, it's not a very good thing to have people just come in and hammer within that first month and then and disappear, because you like you said, and like we've said before, they get their money off the cosmetics, off of the things, putting things on sale. And if you're not there to see the sale, you're not going to be there to buy.
I agree. It's also not good for the community, to be clear. I'm not talking from like a community focused thing, because realistically, a community wants a continuous population so that, in PoE, you can trade items. You want those people generating those items so that the supply is there, so you have a good quality of life and things don't become impossible. Like, I agree with you. I'm just saying, as has previously to the last few leagues, PoE seemed perfectly happy for people to get in and then get the crap out. Make a bunch of money on pre-orders, advertising their new sets, get everyone hyped, buy the stuff, come in, play for 30 seconds, and then be out. Great. Thank you. Come back in 3 months and do the same thing. Like, that was what they're doing. a core problem, and one of the reasons why we're not playing PoE anymore is the fact that they've been consistently increasing how much time they want you to play to accomplish everything, when we already were having problems accomplishing things when it didn't take as long. But that also drives people to be around longer, which, to your point, means that people are more likely to be around for the sales. And the longer you're playing, the more likely you are to buy something. They've been kind of shifting in that direction in the background. But I'm just saying, from a pure financials perspective, irrespective of the game, it's actually beneficial for them for you to show up, give them money, and then get out. You are an ideal live service customer. Not for the health of the game, just for their pure pocketbook. All right. So we've yelled at them for financial stuff. Is there anything else Diablo 4 specifically we want to talk about, or are we good for like transitioning into like kind of the, you know, throwdown POV versus Diablo 4 discussion?
The only things that I have left on Diablo 4 is the long-term playability.
That's a great idea. We did hold off on that. Go for it, sir.
So for me, the long-term playability might not be there. It just really will depend upon the first season. I don't know what the first season is going to look like. Okay, so by the time the first season comes out, I will have 100% of the game. I will have everything completed, all the little quests, everything, little knickknacks done, and et cetera, et cetera. The season comes out. What draw will it have for me? Because I've got one of every character.
Very likely.
Yeah, pretty much. They might not. Every character might not be up into the hundreds or whatever, but I will have played at least one of every character. I will have gone through and changed the powers on them, run them in different things. I might even have two of some characters because, as Taff said earlier, I'm running the Necromancer Shadow. He's running the Necromancer as a blood. I saw some things that was like when he was sitting there and we were just discussing it. It was like, oh, well, I didn't realize that. I wonder if I could do this with blood. So there are certain things, like there's a chess piece. I think it's a unique chess piece that every time you get 10 blood orbs, you spawn a bone spirit. You've got multiple powers that produce blood orbs, and then you also have the situation where if you use blood mist, you can generate. So there's a lot of things that I want to play around with. I'll have that done, And so my question is, will the season draw me in, keep me engaged? And that's the key. Will it keep me engaged? Will there be a new mechanic? Will there be a new modification? Something? What is it? If it's just, hey, you got these challenges to do, is that enough?
I agree with you, and it's my biggest concern with the game. While they've delivered a good entry product, I am very skeptical of Blizzard and Activision being able to deliver on a quarterly schedule these high quality leagues, because the only person in the industry who's doing that right now is Path of Exile. And I think you'll agree with this comment, but Path of Exile leagues are never ready day one. They're very rarely in a very good state. It usually takes the first 2 weeks of the league for basically, because the community are the beta testers. And then after those 2 weeks, if they feel that the league is worth it, they'll patch it and improve it, and it will get into a much better state. Because the 4-month, 3-month time cadence is frankly ludicrous for getting out high quality amount of content. And based on what Blizzard has said, I don't think their leagues are going to be anything like what Path of Exile is planning to deliver, which is a good thing, because there's no way they're going to deliver that. But is it going to be significant enough to bring me back? I really don't think so. But there is a chance that they will do something in one of them because there's a passion project and someone has something and they do something that seems interesting that we might be willing to check out. What's more likely is, based on what they've created, if they're able to keep the interest and they generate whatever the ludicrous amounts of profit that Activision is demanding for this game to continue, the DLC big boxes are probably definitely going to be worthwhile coming back for at least the first one, maybe the second one. Game may be dead after that. I don't know. But I share the same concerns you have.
So I got a question. This is one of those things that kind of goes back to our your last discussion on being good for them to have people in the game, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure.
Do you think that they is POE doing that intentionally? I mean, are they bringing it out because they bring a lot of the times it's not, they have like less bugs compared. It's mostly, this is impossible. How do you expect us to do this? And then they start adjusting things and modifying things to make it where other people can play. Do you think that they're doing that intentionally, making people wait it out, so that they will be there until it actually becomes playable for the masses?
I think the path of Exile that I fell in love with, that we returned to, because we all played towards the beginning of the game when it first launched, in those first few time frames where there was very little game, but it was like, hey, this is cool. There's just not enough for us to keep playing it. And then we came back, we encouraged you to come back, and we got back into it. We played for a long time. Zay and I fell off. You're still playing more or less. You stream it, so that's part of the reason. Like you have a cadence of how long you play it. But the vision that I saw when we came back to the game has not been the vision of the game for a very long time. They sold everyone who, when the best thing that happened for PoE was the Diablo Immortal Do You Not Have Phones incident. They got a ton of people who were much more casual players from Diablo 3 came over into their ecosystem. And if you look at all of the coverage around the first Exile Con, there are plenty of interviews. I don't have them lined up so I can give you links to, but I remember from listening, they said the same things over and over. They want to make the game more accessible. They want to make it available to the most number of people to come and play and enjoy. And they have never delivered on that promise. Everything they've been doing is making the game harder, more tedious, requiring increased play times for the same thing, which seems to be in further to a quote-unquote vision, but realistically, in my opinion, to a profit agenda, because the longer you're playing, the more likely you are to spend money. The problem is that doesn't work in their environment. And they're no longer a small little indie studio. They are a AAA studio. They've had enough staff to be considered a AAA studio for a long time. You cannot be a small niche, Dark Soulsian inspired, hard as nails game for a niche group of people and get the revenue from the vast quantity of casuals and have that player base. Those two things don't work. Elden Ring is the closest that a Dark Souls game has gotten to being part of the main zeitgeist of the industry. And I know of a lot of people who got into that game and then hated it because Dark Souls only appeals to a very small niche audience. But Elden Ring is the most accessible it's ever been, and there are people who've been burned by it, and PoE is having the same problem. I don't know. The lead up to ExileCon 2 here in a short while, the PoE 2 coming out, it's a very interesting, and I'm tangenting into other conversations, I know, but like, you asked an interesting question. My gut is everything they're doing is very intentional. I believe they have monetization specialists on staff. It's a conscious decision. They claim a vision. I think that vision is only partially true. I think they are realizing that loot boxes are coming to an end. They've been dabbling with other ways to get stuff, like they've introduced their own battle pass. They're trying to plan for the future. And if you can't get people to buy loot boxes anymore because it keeps getting more illegal in more and more places, then what can you do? Make the game more grindy and unfun, and then sell them the solution to make it less ungrindy and fun. How long before they start just flat out offering Headhunter in the cash shop every league? You want one? Come buy it. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if that happens sometimes after PoE 2. Not that they've shown any interest or indication that they're going to, but I think there's multiple levels of other ways they can monetize it that they're moving towards, and they have people that they've hired, and we're only seeing the first steps of whatever microtransaction hellscape they're moving to. But that's conspiracy theory. Like, I have no actual evidence. It's just that's my gut. Does that answer your question and way more than you probably asked?
That's good. I mean, that's just one of those ones that I was sitting there and it popped into my brain when you were asking.
It's a great question. And I don't think it's one we've actually talked about in person before. Like, I don't think we've ever actually sat down and talked about that. But these are musings that have been coalescing in the back of my brain too. Like, yeah, I think it's absolutely intentional. I think they have the right people on staff. And they keep those people well from the limelight. And Chris Wilson goes, hey, look at me, I'm the problem. And he keeps saying that. But there's some other people who are making these decisions that they've brought in. And it's intentional. And it's not all for the reasons he's saying, because for better or worse, your opinion may vary, but I don't think he's been completely honest with us for a long time. I really don't. Because you just see the things he says in interviews and how they're demonstrably not true, or not backed up by facts. And like, maybe if you cut him slack, there's a spectrum of how much is he truly involved, because he's the CEO. He's not making all these decisions. They're not a small company anymore. He's being fed information. How much is him being out of the loop outside of the broad strokes? There's valid things you can say, but they've had enough dramas since, 314, whatever Expedition League was. The first major financial crisis that they've experienced in the last couple years, that the good faith that he enjoyed previously and that company enjoyed has disappeared. And I know there's a lot of hyperbole on the internet, but I think you can demonstrably say he may not have willfully lied, but he has flatly said untruths multiple times in the hype material. I think that's the nicest way to say it without getting into the hyperbole that's been on the internet. And like I said, I'm not trying to be crazy on this. I'm trying to be fair, right?
Right. And that's one of the things that the one thing that you have stated before, which is something that, we need to take into account. They're not a little small company anymore. So, is it that he trusts what the individuals are telling him and he's not really involved as deeply as he was before? And they tell him this, he says it, and the next thing you know, he gets hammered for it. I mean, that's a possibility as well.
You're right. But at the very least, they do not have a PR team. There is no one coaching him. Absolutely. That is plainly obvious, because half of their political nightmare fuels that keep happening at every league launch is because there's no one helping him massage that message. Or if they do, it's not a true PR person, or it's a PR person who has no power. I think the easiest solution is they literally don't have a PR person for that. They don't have a legit person whose job is to do public relations. Chris is it. He says what he says, and it's often very bad because he's an IT nerd who used to be a hardcore Diablo 2 enthusiast who wanted to make a harder version of Diablo 2. That's what he wants. He wants a nut crunching game. That's what he's always wanted. That's why Ruthless exists. But they're also dishonest with some of their intentions, and it's been pretty clear to a lot of people that that's true. And regardless of the dishonesty and my feelings on that, the key is if you believe what they say about their vision, they want a small niche game. They want the money of the masses to fund them. And this is not a recipe for success. And tying that back to Diablo IV and what we've talked about, Diablo IV has been the fastest selling Blizzard game of all time. It may be one of the fastest video games of all time. I don't have any metrics on that, but I've seen stories about it being the fastest Activision game of all time. So I know of that. I just don't know the other one for sure, but it's got to be up there. It has had a fantastically good reception initially. That is not good for PoE. Especially because we're just about to go into Exile Con. They're spooling up for PoE 2. This is definitely a financial risk to the next couple leagues of PoE. Because while it won't meet all of the needs of what the core PoE fan base want, they want that deep game which you can sink your teeth into. It has all of the options. I think we can agree Diablo 4 is a shallower game. It's way more in depth than Diablo 3, but it's not as in depth as PoE. Quite frankly, I think it would be almost impossible for anything to be as in depth as PoE, since it's had 10 years of development now. You can't be an initially released game and this is what happened to every WoW clone that came out. Everyone's like, we're going to be the WoW destroyer. It's like, yeah, but WoW's been in development for 5+ years. There's no way you're going to have all of the features and bits and bobs that WoW has now. It's not possible. WoW didn't launch with all those things. It sees every competitor pop up, and then it goes, oh, cool, you did something innovative? Cool, we're going to add that to our game. Fortnite does the same thing too, which is another reason why it's hard for another battle royale to take over from Fortnite. It has the history of being in play advantage and enough developers that they're crunching nonstop to crush any new developments and have it in their game in almost no time flat. So, banana? Maybe it helps PoE. Maybe PoE steps up their game. Maybe some of those developers that have been doing nothing but working on PoE 2 are pulled back from PoE 2 development and actually are forced to work on the leagues again. And maybe then they finally have a decent league launched. I know there's been a couple that have had have been more well received than others. But let's be fair. I think you can agree. For the last 2 years, the trend of leagues has been sparser and sparser, more bugs, less content, but just takes longer to do everything. That seem fair?
I would say that so that it's more of less PoE. The problem that they have been going is each and every league, they're making it so that you have to have that. As one of the guys on my stream, you have to have that PhD. Yep. You have to have that PoE PhD. If you do not have that PoE PhD, you're not going to do well. And he comes to my stream just to ask me questions. Like, hey, does this work? Do you know if this will happen? Do you know what this will work? Because I know enough about it that I can answer his questions.
The other side of that, and the reason why streamers do better than I think your average person who doesn't have that PhD is, even if you only have a major in PoE, you don't have your full PhD, the fact that you're playing on stream, if you have viewers, some of those viewers will know more than you, and they will help educate you and point you in the right direction. They will help you get that PhD on the job. You'll get your what's the high school equivalency? GED?
GED.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, you'll get your PhD by proxy if you play long enough and you have a community following you, right? Because they'll help you fill in they'll be Siri for you and go, you're like, man, I don't know how to make this thing. And then someone will go, please look here. whoop, link. Oh, cool. Now you've got that.
I can
Right?
I can agree with that.
But
I can agree with
to be
that.
fair, you may not have the full PhD, but you're well down that path. Zay and I never got there. There are certain pieces we learned, but like we didn't get deep enough into enough of the systems to be able to handle that ongoing continued escalation of new crap constantly being added. Like it's just overwhelming.
Right.
And if you don't have that
Well,
PhD, that game is just not, you just can't play it at the high levels. You just can't.
right. And the only reason I was able to learn a lot of the mechanics and the small nuances and the things like that was because I was creating all those characters. I create the build from scratch. And yeah, I failed a lot on, oh, I thought this would work. Oh, no, it doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? It should work. And then try to figure out why it wasn't working. So those are some interesting things. But yeah, you are right. You have to get to be able to do well in PoE. You either have to do one or two things. You have to follow guides exactly like they are, exactly what they do, and exactly what they say, which usually means that you need money, which is the one other thing. You have to have some understanding on how to make money in the game.
And deal with pain, because the only ways to make money realistically is being able to identify what is worth money, which is going to change league by league. So you have to be in tune with the meta, right? Knowing what makes a good item, and then having the tolerance to either craft for that or to sell decent items or items that have a niche on the site. And I'll be honest with you. I mean, despite the fact that Chris Wilson says, yeah, the game's balanced around trade, but then they make the trading process the most unbearable thing on the face of this planet. Like, there's not that many people who have the tolerance to do trading on the level needed to make money. And there's not that many who have the tolerance to gamble, because let's be fair, I think we both agree, crafting in PoE is not crafting by any definition. It's a freaking slot machine. PoE is pretty much slot machine after slot machine after slot machine in everywhere that they could possibly put it. You may not have like the cool Las Vegas levers of a slot machine, but it's the same. It's doing the same thing in principle.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, there's no real deterministic configuration that you can do inside. I mean, there is, but it's very hard to execute any of those things inside of
But deterministic by PoE standards is not deterministic. It just means that if you get a thing to a certain place and you've done these things, you've locked out 90% of the things that could happen. So now you only have 10%, which means you've rigged the system in a way that it's much more likely for it to happen, but it's still a slot machine. And GGG tends to get rid of the ones that are absolutely guaranteed on a frequent basis once the community figures it out. Some may still assist the game. Like I said, I'm not following it, but everything I've seen over time, it's like someone finds a way, like this way guarantees that you could put this lightning mod, which is perfect for this lightning meta skill. Boom. And that gets published out, and then they see it just like the community sees it. And then what do you know? Next patch. Oh, yep. Things have changed. That tag can't exist anymore, so you can't make that guaranteed. There's now 12 other tags added into that thing. So good luck. Go back to gambling. I want to tangent for a second on that thought, but I want to use another example, other things. So I'm not against digging deep into systems and learning things, or playing hard content. Like, I went down a rabbit hole with Fire Emblem Three Houses. It's not on the same level, but I played that game 3.5, 4 times, although only 3 of those. I think it's 4 times because I played it halfway through twice. But I went into the nitty gritty on how to design what I call the Golden Deer House Air Force that I iterated over 3 playtimes to be able to make this thing. And while the sheer amount of computations and iterations needed to make it happen is much less than what you do in PoE. It still took a lot of time. For God's sakes, I played the game 3 times to figure it out fully to do that, right? That took a lot of things. I'm currently playing a complete overhaul of BattleTech harebrained scheme game called BTA 3062, which brings a whole bunch of the stuff from the tabletop into the thing. That game is way more complicated in what you can do with mech design and unit composition and what actually is quote unquote effective as a unit force than what's in the base game. I know there's a lot of people who may have enjoyed BattleTech, the base game, who just looking at the mech lab in BTA 36.2 would be like, do what has popularly been seen on by a few people in YouTube videos when they first see the tree of PoE, right? They just close the game and walk away for good. But to parallel back to PoE, we've talked about this concept before, though. Despite the fact that tree is so huge, for a particular style of character, whether a spellcaster, a summoner, specifically a lightning spellcaster versus an ice spellcaster, or versus melee, how much of the tree is legitimately useful, right? Like, more or less, if you see builds by 3 or 4 different people who are all making a summon specter build, I would dare say 80% of their tree is probably very similar. It's only a few nodes here and there that they're going to choose differently based on what they're doing. Do you think that's fairly accurate, Mal, or am I a little off?
No, they're inside of PoE, inside the tree, there are specific nodes that are just better than everything else. And so how you path to it might not be, might be different, but you're going to get the same nodes because you need those particular things to you need those things to survive. Now, currently, right now, they have a lot of different things that are in place so that you can get those nodes without necessarily pathing to them, but those can come at a very high price, or you need specific items to be able to do that.
Yeah. And how do you get to knowledge to do those, to get those things? I mean, let's be fair. If it wasn't for the community and all of the tools the community has built, I don't think that game is playable by more than like probably 10 people in the world. I mean, that's probably hyperbolic, but you know what I'm saying, right? Like, GGG has done nothing to help the community truly understand things. Everything's obscure. The only reason we have it is because there are some crazy people in the world who really love diving into stuff, and eventually will share so they're learning with the rest of the community, and then that stuff turns into tools. Like you've got the tools that deal to help give you odds of like, hey, if you use these type of things, how likely are you to get these results, or help pick the right things to get the items that you want in your gear, and then the percentages, right? But that's not something that came from PoE. That's a simulator that someone wrote, right? And none of this is part of the base game. If you didn't have all these third-party tools, the game is just, it doesn't function, in my opinion. I mean, it does. You can technically play it, but for the vast majority of people, I don't think the game is worth playing at that point. And it's the community that's holding that up. Whereas if you look at, I know it's a much more simpler game. You look at Diablo IV, but I'm presuming you've turned on the functions that tell you like this is an additive versus a multiplicative. This is the ranges you can get on gear, so you can tell if your item is a low roll or a high roll. I'm presuming you've turned those on as well, right?
No, I actually have not even turned those on.
It exists. I believe it's under
I know
accessibility.
It does. I know it does. I actually had I found out that it existed from another one of the streamers that I know, and he had stopped to buy my channel, and he was like, "Hey, dude, you know about this?" And I was like, "No, I did not know about that." But that's one of those things that you if I would have looked through the interface, I'd have found it. Looked through the things, but I didn't really. And that's another thing. Do I really need that yet? I mean, maybe if I was min-maxing, and that's one thing about Diablo 4 that I think I'll have to point out. Diablo 4, I haven't felt like I need to min-max. I can get through things. I can kill things. I'm not dying.
You're not wrong. I turned them on, but the reason I turned them on is because it's two different flags. But it's because I was trying to figure out information about lucky hit. And when you turn on one of those two tags and you highlight over your powers, it tells you what the lucky hit percentage is. So it helped me figure out, because I was looking at something, I was like, well, I don't know what the lucky hit percentages are for these. Is this even worth it related to my blood powers? So that's why I turned it on. And then I turned the other thing on, and it was just like, yeah, well, I mean, like, I turned on one of these. I might as well turn on both. And they're informative. It's like, oh, cool. To your point, I've never felt that I've needed to have like max rolls or go away, because I'm still looking at like, hey, well, are these loosely the modifiers that I would like on my gear or not? If they're not, like, overpower is important to me. Damage reduction while fortified generation. These are things that are useful to blood powers. So I look for things that have these mechanics. If they don't have those mechanics, then it's probably not a good piece for me regardless. Past that, green arrow go up, yay. Right? You're right. But in PoE, like, there's a difference between additive bonuses or more bonuses versus whatever. Nearby is the biggest joke in the game, because what does nearby mean? It's different for every single instance of nearby in the game. Whereas I looked it up, you can find out what nearby means. The definition in Diablo is they're in melee range. So whatever the melee range is for a particular character, that's nearby. So it could be different for every, like a skeleton could have a different melee range than a big ass brute who has a giant two-handed sword. If they're in range to hit you with their sword, they're nearby. Elegant. Makes sense. If you look for it, you can find the answer. The tooltips tell you. Tooltips in Path of Exile don't tell you shit. In fact, they probably lie to you.
I can agree with that statement. I mean, the tooltips are in Path of Exile are mostly useless. It's one of those, but like you said, it's one of those you have to kind of go through and have that mentality with PoE to understand that no matter what they say, it's not there. It's like you got to deal with those type of things. But that, like, the PoE is also, to me, PoE is a different type of game compared to Diablo.
Oh, absolutely.
Diablo to me is more about the story a lot. And the play style is more about the story for me. And I enjoy it because it does have that rich story behind it that just makes me happy. I get a little giddy feeling in the inside.
You say that, which I find is funny and just random comment, and yet GGG really wants us to play through the campaign every single time you make a new character, even though people have been screaming at them for years that leveling the maps is the most unfun thing to the core audience. And they're like, oh, well, we'll just make a more dynamic story. I'm like, I hate to break it to you, but there is no way you're making your story as good as the one in Diablo 4. And I never thought I'd say that. They did a fantastic freaking job. Like, they truly, like I said, they supported their developers, like, for sure. Like, they actually gave them creative freedom and they came out with something stellar. I think GGG could give all of the creative freedom in the world to their developers, and I still don't think they're going to make a story as good as what's in Diablo 4. I just don't have faith that they can do it. I want them to. I just don't see it happening.
Okay, so I don't know if I can exactly agree with that. I can understand what you mean by replaying the same story over and over again. That's
I think adventure mode sits better in PoE. I think that would go over as a mechanic better than it will in Diablo IV. Is basically what I'm saying. But they've refused to do it.
but the Diablo 4 is basically an open world type configuration. PoE never was.
Yeah. But they've had open delve. They've done, I mean, it used to be people leveled in, I think it was the ledge or something, like before they truly refined their map system. Like really the core of PoE is that map system. Right. And there's realistically no reason they couldn't, if they took the time, recreate a map system that slowly levels you and you just do maps the whole time. And that could be the game. You could. And for a lot of people, they'd be fine with that. Not everyone. It wouldn't be the only way, but it's totally an option that probably should have been in the game 5 years ago and still isn't. Whereas Blizzard did that in Diablo 3, right? Adventure mode existed. They have it in 4. I think we both agree that we have no interest in doing an adventure mode after your initial testing and what the results of it in Diablo 4. It still seems like a natural conclusion because it's something that the player base has been clamoring for, and yet they still haven't done it. They prefer to just remake a more expansive story that potentially has options, but based on their track record and the story they've delivered so far in their 10 acts, I submit I don't think it's possible that it's going to hold up to what Diablo 4 does, and they're going to have the same problems and the same complaints within a couple months of launching a PoE 2. That's all I'm saying.
Right. Well, see, but this is, your initial statement is that they don't have the story. The story to me, when I first played through, when I got back, was great. But playing it over and over again, you're right. The story, I mean, you know the story. You know what's going on. You've done it, like you said, hundreds of times. Every season, and let's just say every season I do 5 characters every season, right? So that's 5 characters every season. That's 5 times in a season. That's 3 months later, I'm doing it again. So that's I done been through that, 5 times in that one. And every 3 months I do it again. So,
and despite
but the
fact
story
that
doesn't change. The story's not dynamic. It doesn't change.
Right. And not only that, leading up to PoE 2, what was one of the things they thought was really important to do? Let's redo all the acts. And they got through what? The first 3, maybe? Of making them more difficult and tedious, even though everyone said, why are you doing this? This is the least interesting part of the game for most people.
When they redid the acts, all they did was they revamped some of the mechanics and some of the things going in the acts. They didn't actually redo the story of that.
Correct. What I'm saying is I'm tangenting between 2 different things. Just like the lead up to maps is the thing that weeds out new people from playing the game. Also, new people don't know why people are the veterans dislike this process. But I can guarantee that because this is not a very casual friendly game, that does not have good documentation, that does not hold your hand in any way, shape, or form, of the few people that they do get to play every league, a handful of those are probably turned off by the increased difficulty. If your intention was to make it more challenging for veterans, then why didn't they start with Act 10 and work their way backwards? Because you still are easing people in. Your first acts should be the easiest in the game. In the game, it's the way you introduce people to the game. Challenge should happen over time, not be right up front and then magically it's not hard anymore because you got past the ones that they already redid. You see what I'm saying? Like the
mechanics of PoE is all they just. How can I put the mechanics of PoE? They have good ideas in certain aspects, but the implementation is bad.
Yes, agreed.
And it's like the prime example of they had a map system. This was probably right when y'all got ready to leave. Cirrus, when Cirrus was first initially put in place, that was a wonderful thought.
Implemented terribly. Yep, I agree.
Because they were like, oh, we're going to ramp up the difficulty, et cetera, with the over time. But the problem was you made it hard initially, and then you ramped up the difficulty. And when after you ramped the difficulty up, you never reverted back for new characters that were generated. There was a whole bunch of problems. And then when they made modifications to it, they didn't if you wanted to do it, you could say, okay, level 1 Cirrus had X things that drop. Level 2 Cirrus has bigger and better things that drop. So it gave you a reason to do the higher and rougher and larger things. Yeah, I might never have gotten to the tier 3 Cirrus, but at least I was able to execute the content. Because as you were saying, they initially were trying to get more and more people to be able to do things. Well, it was implemented incorrectly. If they could have separated and said, "Hey, we have tier of drops, tiers of things," and then been like, "Okay, this is I'll put it to you. This is for the people that can't do. Let's just be call it that. People that can't do, you can still get through everything. Because if that's a prime example, Diablo IV, World Tier 1. Those people, they can get through the game, and they can get through the game completely.
Yeah, ironically, World Tier 1 is used more by the min-maxers. Like, why do I want to challenge until I get to World Tier 3? I find that ironic, but your statement stands. I just felt it was funny to just point out. It's like, actually, the people who use World Tier 1 more than anything are the super min-maxers, but the intent is still there, and you're right. For those people who are so casual, they just don't, you could still play World Tier 1 and get to the pinnacle dungeon. Absolutely.
Right. And then World Tier 2 gives you a little bit more. World Tier 3 gives you a little bit more. World Tier 4 gives you the most. But and yes, you are correct. The min-maxers, they run World Tier 1 because there's no real benefit of doing the hard things initially. Get me to that end game, get me to that level, my max level. And then after I got my max level, I can go ahead and I can switch out of World Tier 1, go and do the capstone dungeon, get into World Tier 3, then start grinding the last 50 Paragon levels while making and getting myself the best gear that I possibly can get. Yes, but that's a time thing. It's
right.
Time-wise, it's faster to level in 1 than it is to try to level in 2. Even though 2 gives you more experience and some other things, it is harder.
But it's actually a challenge periodically. I'm not saying a hard challenge, but there is challenge in it, right? Like, I much rather play in 2 because then I don't feel like I'm rolling my face across the keyboard. I at least have to pay attention. Don't be stupid. Now, I'm playing a tanky character, so like, I can still kind of do that. But that's because of the design of my character, right? Your glass cannons most certainly cannot do that on World Tier 2 unless you have some ridiculous gear.
So, but then that's also a different play style. You got to think about it that way. You're playing for enjoyment and fun.
Yes, I'm not playing to be a cheesy little min-maxer who has to get to the end of content in 2 days. Correct.
Or a min-maxer that's like, I want the best. All I want is the best gear as fast as possible.
Correct.
So, like you said before, you enjoy playing the game. Zay has said she enjoys playing the game. Totally different mental process. My sons and I, we play on World Tier 2. Even though World Tier 2 is harder and slower, we level way slower.
Yeah, that's what we did.
What we would inside of 1. We play on World Tier 2 because it's enjoyable for us 3 to play together on that level.
Yeah, I was just poking fun at min-maxers. That's all I was doing. I think all three of us plus your sons are in alignment. The game is better on World Tier 2 to start. I mean, there is compelling reasons mechanically why you do World Tier 1. I'm not going to be a tie killer racer. It's not going to happen. So therefore, those concerns are immaterial to me, and I have to tease them slightly. That's all. And I'm not saying Ty put forth that suggestion on this. I have no idea if he's played Diablo. Probably not. I would assume it does not hold their interest because it's not as mechanically complex.
Ty did play. Be exact, Ty, Ziz, Steel Mage, and some other guy were doing the race to get to the end, to get to the 100 and I don't think they all were eligible because I think a few of them had
they'd played the earlier things,
beta. Yeah, so it's one of those ones but I know he did play. I think right now after the race is over and they got to 100, he's not playing anymore. He's actually playing RuneScape.
That doesn't shock me. RuneScape will never die. It's like the OG difficulty MMOE type game. I mean, I'm not one who's massive on visuals. For God's sakes, I've played plenty of like RPG Maker, pixel RPGs that look like they're back from the SNES days. But, you know. All right. I think there's one more thing I'd like to call out as a sin of PoE that I don't think you'll disagree with. And that is balancing via one-shot mechanics. I think we can agree that more or less your health pool in PoE is effectively a Boolean value a lot of the time. It's either full or you're dead. Now, realistically, you're not getting killed by just one hit. It's usually more like you're hit by like 10 things that overlap, and then that just nukes you from orbit. But, as the community will put it, one-shots are the thing that exists in PoE, and that's kind of how it's balanced. And I don't think that's a case in Diablo 4. Maybe in World Tier 4, but definitely not in leveling. We've only encountered one boss here near the end of Act 3 where we're at who seemed to do that type of significant damage. They had like little rings of red that they teleported in, and then they did these little projectiles that popped out in 4 different directions, and if you got hit by those, they would smoke you. Like, it wasn't necessarily a one-shot either, but they did kill my blood golem from full because it's stupid and it stood in one of those. Like, and I got messed up by those once. But that's a one-off in Diablo 4 versus the reality of 90% of PoE, in my opinion.
At least so far, anyways.
Yeah.
I can say that my son and I, we did a couple of different dungeons, and there are some creatures and some guys that actually were decimating us. They destroyed us, and it was we got hit. They would we would get hit, froze, and then they would do some type of leap slam, and the leap slam was killing us. And so that was kind of disheartening at the time.
Right.
But it's one of those things that happened, and we were like, okay, yeah. And we just kept on moving, and we just kept on moving forward, trying to do what we could to complete the dungeon. We did. That was probably the most times that I have died in Diablo 4 was when when we ran into that dungeon with those guys. I haven't had that happen since, but
sure.
They were bad.
So realistically, it's probably a case of a couple of bosses being overtuned in their formula, but you also probably adapted so you were able to avoid it somewhat. I mean, there are powers in the game that can help you get out of freezes. Like, if I'm smart and I don't burn my blood mist constantly and I save it for like when I learn that a boss can do something like that, blood mist will stop you from being frozen, crowd controlled, etc. And then you're invulnerable. Yes. So boom, if they froze me, I immediately kick that off. So when it tries to do a jump towards me, hey, it's not going to work because I'm immune. Suck it.
Right. And it was just a combination of to me it's just like what they do in PoE. If you get that 2 combo configuration, guy who freeze plus you have the leap slam configuration with this, boom, you got a problem. PoE has the same thing.
Except in PoE, it's like a main balancing. It's like a main balancing thing. It happens all the time, right?
Yeah. Yeah, they have a lot of powers that are just too similar. And when they made the modifications recently, getting rid of their little configuration that they put in place, they got rid of it. And when they initially got rid of it, they were like, okay, we'll make sure that certain things don't stack. But they didn't, they really still didn't understand until recently. When you have a power that has 5 separate effects, and you don't put it with this other power that has 5 effects, but you have one of these other things that when you put that 5 power effect and that 1 power effect together, it becomes impossible. And so then they finally were like, okay, fine, we'll get rid of it. So they split them all up. So now every power is in singulars. But you still have the possibility of something being pretty tough to fight because those 2 powers synergize together. That's pretty much what happened in Diablo IV for me and my son and I.
Right.
We went into a dungeon. We just had 2 powers that were synergizing real well together, and they killed us.
Yeah, that's fair. And I mean, honestly, I don't mind the concept of a spike occasionally, right?
Yeah.
I do mind it when it's like, oh, by the way, we're putting this thing, and it's quite literally, it's impossible unless you gain 10 levels. Go pound sand, deal with it. And then it roadblocks you. That I'm not a big fan of.
Got it.
But in general, like having more challenger bosses, like the world is not going to have an overall amazing impression of what was that game? Outlands, Outworld, Outriders. That's it, right? That we all played a bit together, right? And we went through and like we kept turning up the difficulty, which I liked. The fact that you could turn it up and down. And there were a couple times where like this fight is not balanced for this level for us right now. We should turn it down. But we'd bang our head against it about 2-3 times before we might make that call every once in a while. But in general, we played it on the hardest difficulty we could, right? That's cool. That's me choosing to opt to go smack my head against the wall because we've decided to play it on the harder difficulty. I'm okay with that. I'm just not okay with the way it's balanced in PoE. With all the other challenges we've talked about, with its accessibility challenges, its obscureness, like just hard, the PhD you need to learn. I just feel it needs a redesign from the ground up. And if they decide that they want it to be in evoking the difficulty of Dark Souls, cool. I just think that they kind of have a financial apocalypse coming to their way in light of, like we've talked before, like surprisingly Diablo IV has been good. Now, this might not be a long-term challenge for them. This might only be a short-term of like the next few months. So maybe only the next league is a challenge. For all we know, Diablo IV will disappear from the face of the planet once the first season launches, right? But it really should be invoking a better behavior in GGG right now. It really should. Because if it's not, they got a very rocky, short financial history in front of them. Not as like the end of their company, but like they got a couple leagues which are going to be heavily dictated by their decision. Because there's a lot of people probably aren't coming back to the next PoE league right now. The last PoE league benefited from the betas. A lot of people came in and played that last PoE league because they were jonesing from some ARPG goodness. Like they benefited from that. But
yes,
Diablo 4 is not going anywhere now. It still exists. So those people were like, I just want to play some ARPGs. Well, they can. They can just keep playing Diablo 4. They may not graduate to PoE unless PoE improves and becomes more accessible and becomes a thing that more people really want to dive into. Even if there's some compelling reasons to play it, it's got a lot of negatives that we've just gone through, right? That they really need to address seriously if they truly want to be a player in a more competitive action RPG environment. Anyway, I think we've covered a lot. I hopefully you don't feel like I beat you up. I think we kind of agree more or less on the big concerns that PoE has. You know, you're willing to still play the game. You still find fun. Zay and I have fallen off. We would like to play again. We'd like them to address some of these things, and then maybe we'll come back. But I don't think, I'm hoping you don't feel like I was putting you on the spot, like, answer for the sins.
Right. No, you didn't put me on the spot. PoE is, like I said, PoE, the main thing about PoE that most people need to understand, and anybody listening needs to understand when they need to understand that PoE is one of those games that you just gotta find your own niche on how to play the game to enjoy the game. For me, it has always been figuring out how to do things with the least. If I can get a character built together and put together so they can get to tier 16 maps and run through the tier 16 maps with the lowest pieces of gear and everything, that's perfectly fine. And you alluded to it one time is with my builds, yeah, they're specifically tailored to get to tier 16s. And the one thing is you switch pieces of gear, switch this or switch that, it makes it, they might not survive certain things. But those are the things that like you said before, you have to know the game enough to be able to say this is not load bearing, or if I'm pulling this load bearing piece off, I need to make multiple changes to actually get XYZ or to be able to do these things. I have a lot of guys that are on my stream that look at the build, pull the build, they play it, and they get all the way to and they've gotten to the end. They're like, hey, this is the first time I've made it to maps. This is the first time I've done to tier 16 maps, and they're very thankful on that. And then there's guys like Shadow, who used to knock my builds constantly because I was not spending tons of money making it, min-maxing it, making it really, really powerful. And now he's like, because he's went from being a student,
he now has a full-time job.
Yeah, he's got a full-time job. Shadow actually comes in and has been like, hey, I need you to make a build with the cheapest things that you can possibly get. I'll enhance it, because his build concept and his mind concept on his builds have always been, I've got tons of money. This is what I need. I can get anything I want, and I'm just going to switch it up to make it that way. So now he looks at, and he's taking my builds and starting with my build. And then he goes and says, okay, I'm making money now, et cetera, et cetera. Now I can take his build and rip it apart and make modifications to make it even stronger. But at least I'm where I need to be before I can actually start adjusting.
But he's a guy who has that PhD, so he can do that.
Yes.
That was not something that was Zay or I's specialty for sure in the game. No, that's fair.
PoE
I think it's a good call out.
Yeah, PoE is a hard game. It's a hard game to understand. But it's just like with Diablo, same with Diablo 4. You have to find that play style that's good for you. If you can't play World Tier 2 and you're like, hey, I just want to feel like I'm awesome and I can kill everything, I'll go World Tier 1 and just do whatever I need, or be like, okay, well, this World Tier 1 is too easy. I want a little challenge. Do World Tier 2. Listen to the story if you want to. Don't listen to the story. You just got, in any AARPG or any action RPG, you really need to just find your niche.
Agreed. I think that's a good place. Zay, Mal, any closing thoughts? Anything else you want to leave us with?
Yes. Soul Frame is going to be coming out eventually and sometime in the near future. Please, everybody buy it and get in it.
I mean, I look forward to playing some. Maybe we can do some streaming or whatnot. Other things, I'd love to have you on again if you're up for it, for maybe when we re-record the RPG podcast, since spoiler, audio is hard. And
Not a problem.
I'd love us to get into maybe do some if you stream it and then we eventually record or do a record. I'd love to do some Project Zomboid when it finally releases a new version. Don't be a stranger is all I'm saying.
I was about to mention the Project Zomboid again because I love that game.
Our Project Zomboid server is always up and running.
I know. It's just one of these things that I'm waiting for more updates, and well, I should say Tath is waiting for the updates. Yes. For me, you know me, I can always just sit there doing the whole farming in the house, doing the whole upgrading the house. You guys can go kill zombies. I'll take care of the homestead.
Have gun will travel in Project Zomboid. That's
there
my motto.
You go.
That's exactly right.
You give me an excuse to go shoot zombies, I'll do it. I'm happy. That's fine. If you take care of the homestead, I'm okay with that. If you want to come out and explore, I'm okay with that. As long as I get to shoot zombies, I'll be a happy Tath.
Yeah, I guess the only other closing thoughts that I have with regards specifically to POE and Diablo IV is the hopes that, as we mentioned earlier, that Diablo IV does actually have content to keep people coming back. I am enjoying what I'm playing. Would I enjoy coming back through that game loop and playing different characters and exploring new content? Yes. I am unsure that even though they have stated that they want to do more frequent updates, more, and the expansions, of course, being larger things, I am unsure that they are really willing to put in the time and the effort that, in a sense, POE has gone through to be able to bring those changes to the game, to bring a new content, new challenges that you can find in POE.
Yeah, I would say I want more competition in the genre, because for a long time it's been a barren hellscape of basically just PoE, with Diablo 3 technically having seasons, but there really not being anything else. Wolcen may have not panned out. Last Epoch may not be there quite yet, but at least we're seeing signs of renewed interest from the industry in this genre, and more competition can only make it better, stronger, faster, etc. in the future.
Well, guys, thank you so very much for joining in on this podcast on ARPGs and Diablo and Path of Exile. And once again, thank you, Malentent, for joining us today. Please find his content on twitch.tv/Malentent. Once again, he can be found streaming every Friday night at 7 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time, Sunday mornings at 7 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time, and Sunday mornings 7 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time. You're crazy of getting up that early in the morning to do that, but that's all you, boo. And also, his content can be found on youtube.com/Malentent, where he has clips, guides, and other video game content. Tatharis, could you please close us out of this podcast today?
In the immortal words of me, put that in your pipe and smoke it.
Thank you, guys. Have a good one.